The blizzard howled like a wounded beast across the Dakota Territory, but the sound that woke Abigail Matthews from her fitful sleep was far more terrifying. Silence. Her baby had stopped crying. Lunging from beneath the tattered quilt, she scrambled to the wooden crate that served as a cradle, her heart pounding against her ribs, until she saw the steady rise and fall of her daughter's tiny chest. Wyoming Territory, 1875, thank the Lord, Abigail whispered, brushing a finger across her 4-month-old daughter's cheek. The infant stirred but didn't wake, finally exhausted after hours of colic that Abigail could do nothing to soothe. The abandoned trapper's cabin they'd found 3 days ago kept out the worst of the snow, but the temperature had dropped dangerously through the night. Abigail added the last pieces of wood to the struggling fire, knowing it wouldn't last until morning. Her husband James had promised to return with supplies 2 days ago. Deep down, she knew he wasn't coming back, not this time. The gold fever that had drawn them west had consumed him entirely, leaving her with empty promises and a newborn daughter. She pressed her forehead against the cabin's lone window, wiping away frost to peer into the darkness. The storm showed no signs of breaking. Their food was nearly gone. By tomorrow night, they would have neither warmth nor sustenance. Tears threatened, but Abigail forced them back. Crying wouldn't save her baby. Dawn brought no relief. The wind still howled, but Abigail had made her decision. She couldn't wait any longer. Wrapping little Emma in every scrap of clothing they had, she secured the baby against her chest inside her coat. With trembling hands, she packed their meager belongings, a photograph of her parents, a silver locket, and the last heel of bread into a small sack. "We're going to find help, sweet girl," she whispered, kissing Emma's forehead. "Just stay warm for Mama." She pushed open the cabin door and stepped into a world of white. The snow reached past her knees, and the wind stole her breath away. Orienting herself toward what she believed was south, Abigail began to walk. Time lost meaning as she trudged through the endless white. Every step required monumental effort. She sang softly to Emma, lullabies her own mother had once sung, though the wind carried the words away. When her legs began to buckle, she forced herself to think of spring meadows and warm kitchens. When her mind grew foggy, she focused on the precious weight against her chest. The world tilted suddenly. Abigail realized she had fallen only when she felt the cold seeping through her clothes. Rising seemed impossible. Her limbs refused to cooperate. Emma began to whimper. "Just a short rest," Abigail murmured, though she knew the danger. She had heard the stories of travelers who sat down in snowstorms, never to rise again. But her body betrayed her will. Her eyelids grew heavy. A distant sound penetrated her consciousness, the crunch of snow under hooves. Hallucinations, she thought. But then came a voice, deep and urgent. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Strong hands lifted her. Abigail clutched at her coat. "My baby," she gasped. "I've got you both," the voice assured her. Through half-frozen lashes, she glimpsed a man's face beneath a snow-dusted hat. He lifted her onto a horse, mounting behind her and wrapping them both in a heavy buffalo robe. "Hold on," he said, his arm secure around her waist. "My ranch is close." Consciousness faded in and out as the horse battled through the drifts. Abigail was aware only of warmth at her back and the precious bundle against her chest. When the horse finally stopped, she heard doors opening, voices calling, but couldn't make sense of the words. The next thing she knew, she was lying before a roaring fire. A woman's weathered face hovered above her. "The baby," Abigail croaked. "Your little one's fine," the woman said, stepping aside to reveal a gray-haired man cradling Emma, feeding her from a bottle of milk. "Hungry as a bear cub, but no worse for wear. Tears of relief spilled down Abigail's cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank Elliot," the woman said. "If he hadn't found you when he did." It wasn't until evening that Abigail properly met her rescuer. She had been bathed, dressed in borrowed clothes, and fed hot stew that brought life back to her limbs. Emma, clean and content, slept in a proper cradle fashioned from a drawer. A knock at the door preceded the entrance of a tall man with broad shoulders and eyes the color of summer sky. He removed his hat, revealing brown hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Madam," he said, nodding, "I'm Elliot Kincaid. This is my ranch. How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks to you," Abigail said. "I'm Abigail Matthews, and that's Emma." Elliot glanced at the sleeping baby with a gentle smile. "She's a fighter, that one. Made it through a blizzard that's claimed grown men. We both owe you our lives." He shook his head, embarrassed by her gratitude. Any decent man would have done the same. What were you doing out in such weather? The kindness in his voice broke through her reserve. Abigail found herself telling him everything: how her husband had been seduced by rumors of gold, how they journeyed west despite her family's objections, how James had grown increasingly restless after Emma's birth, disappearing for days at a time. "The last time I saw him was 3 days ago," she finished quietly. "He said he'd be back with supplies, but you don't think he's coming back?" Elliot finished for her. Abigail looked down at her hands. "No, I don't." Elliot's jaw tightened. "No man worth his salt abandons his family in winter, gold or no gold." "I don't know what I'll do now," she admitted. "We spent everything getting here." "You'll stay until the weather breaks," Elliot said firmly. "After that, we'll figure something out. I can't impose, it's no imposition. Martha and Robert, they're my ranch hands who have been looking after you. They could use the help in the house if you're willing to earn your keep. They're getting on in years." "I'd be glad to help," Abigail said, relief washing through her. "I'm a good cook and I can sew." Elliot nodded, satisfied. "Then it's settled. Rest now. There's plenty of time to talk when you're stronger." As he turned to leave, Abigail called after him. "Mr. Kincaid, why were you out in the storm?" He paused at the door. "Lost calf, never found it." A shadow crossed his face. "But I found something more important instead." The days stretched into weeks. February gave way to March, and the worst of winter's fury abated. Abigail settled into life at the Kincaid Ranch, helping Martha with cooking and mending, learning the rhythm of ranch life. Emma thrived, growing plump and increasingly alert. Elliot Kincaid, Abigail discovered, was a man of few words but constant action. He had built his modest ranch from nothing after returning from the war, working the land with a quiet determination that commanded respect from his small crew of ranch hands. He was fair but firm, generous but practical, and he was wonderful with Emma. He would hold her in his large, calloused hands with surprising gentleness, telling her stories about the horses and cattle as if she understood every word. More than once, Abigail found herself watching them together, a strange ache in her chest. One evening, as Abigail sat mending shirts by the fire, Elliot entered the house after a long day of work. He smiled when he saw Emma lying on a blanket, kicking her legs energetically. "She gets stronger every day," he commented, crouching down to let the baby grab his finger. "Yes," Abigail agreed. "Thanks to you and this home you've provided." Something in her voice made him look up. "You're thinking about leaving." It wasn't a question. Abigail set down her sewing. "Spring's coming. The passes will clear. I should make plans." "Where would you go?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Back east, perhaps. My parents disowned me when I married James, but maybe now. With a grandchild, they might reconsider," Elliot finished. "Maybe." Abigail didn't sound convinced. "Or I could try to find work in one of the bigger settlements." Elliot was quiet for a moment, still letting Emma play with his finger. You could stay here. Abigail's heart skipped. I can't be your charity case forever. Not charity, he said firmly. The ranch needs a woman's touch. Martha and Robert will be moving on soon. Robert's rheumatism is getting worse, and they want to live closer to their daughter in California. He met her eyes. I need help running this place. You need a home for you and Emma. It's a fair arrangement. It made sense. Yet Abigail hesitated. People will talk. Let them, Elliot said, rising to his feet. I've never much cared what people think. But Abigail had learned the hard way how cruel gossip could be. I'll think about it, she promised. That night, unable to sleep, Abigail stood by her window watching moonlight silver the land. The ranch was beautiful, a sprawling valley cradled by distant mountains, with a creek running clear and cold along its eastern edge. In the few months she'd been there, it had begun to feel like home in a way no place had since she'd left her parents' house. And there was Elliot. Steady, honorable Elliot who asked for nothing but gave everything. She'd seen how the neighboring ranchers respected him, how his men looked to him not just as a boss, but as a leader. She'd watched his hands gentle frightened horses and build fences strong enough to withstand the fiercest winds, hands that had saved her and Emma from certain death. Morning brought resolution. Abigail found Elliot in the barn, checking a mare who was close to foaling. I've decided to stay, she said without preamble. At least until summer's end. By then, I'll have saved enough to make a proper decision about our future. Relief flickered across his face, quickly masked. Good. Robert and Martha will be glad to hear it. And you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Elliot looked at her then, his gaze direct. I'm glad too, Abigail, gladder than I probably should be. The honesty in his voice made her cheeks warm. I'll go tell Martha the news, she said, retreating before the moment could deepen into something she wasn't ready to face. Spring arrived in earnest, transforming the valley into a tapestry of wildflowers and fresh grass. Cattle were moved to higher pastures, new foals tottered beside their mothers, and the days grew longer and warmer. Emma began to crawl, exploring the world with determined curiosity. Martha and Robert departed for California with tearful goodbyes and extracted promises of letters. Abigail took over the running of the house completely, finding unexpected satisfaction in making it a true home. She planted a garden, hung curtains she'd sewn herself, and filled the rooms with the scents of fresh bread and stew. Elliot brought her wildflowers that she pressed between the pages of a Bible. He carved a wooden horse for Emma that the baby dragged everywhere. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson while Emma slept inside. They rarely spoke of personal matters, keeping conversation to ranch business and Emma's progress. But Abigail felt something growing between them, fragile as a seedling, but persistent. Then, in early June, James Matthews rode into the yard. Abigail was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats. Shading her eyes against the sun, she watched a rider approach. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. She stood frozen, sheets forgotten in her hands as her husband dismounted. He looked terrible, thin and weather-beaten, his once handsome face now gaunt and lined. But his smile was the same, flashing white teeth in a now unkempt beard. Abby, he called, using the nickname she'd once loved. My God, I've finally found you. Emma, playing on a blanket nearby, looked up at the strange voice. James stared at her, his expression a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. Is that your daughter? Abigail said, her voice steadier than she felt. Emma. James took a step toward the baby, but Abigail moved faster, scooping Emma into her arms. The protective gesture wasn't lost on him. I've been searching for months, he said. After the storm, I couldn't get back to the cabin. By the time I made it, you were gone. I've been tracking you ever since. Why? The question emerged harsher than she intended. James looked genuinely surprised. To bring you home, of course. To make things right. What home, James? We never had one. Just a series of camps and shacks while you chased the next big strike. That's changed now, he insisted, taking a step closer. I found it, Abby, a vein richer than anything the territory's seen. I've filed a claim, set up proper operations. We'll have a real house, servants even. Emma will want for nothing. The mention of their daughter in the same breath as his gold made Abigail's blood run cold. She nearly died because of your gold, she said quietly. We both did. James had the grace to look ashamed. I know I made mistakes, terrible ones, but I'm here to make amends, to be the husband and father I should have been all along. He reached for her hand. Come home with me, Abby. Before she could answer, another set of hoofbeats approached. Elliot rode into the yard, dismounting in one fluid motion. His expression was carefully neutral as he assessed the situation, but Abigail saw the tension in his shoulders. Everything all right, Abigail? He asked, coming to stand beside her. This is James Matthews, she said, the words sticking in her throat. My husband. Elliot's jaw tightened, but he extended his hand. Elliot Kincaid. James shook it briefly, eyes narrowing. You've been looking after my wife and child. They've been living at my ranch, yes, Elliot said evenly. An uncomfortable silence stretched between the men. Abigail shifted Emma in her arms, the baby sensing the tension and beginning to fuss. James was just telling me about his gold strike, Abigail said finally. He wants us to go with him. Something flickered in Elliot's eyes, pain quickly masked. I see, that's a decision you'll need to make. I've made a home for them, James said, a hint of challenge in his voice. A real home, not a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Elliot's expression hardened. Abigail and Emma have a home here for as long as they want it, one where they're safe and cared for. By you, James asked, his implication clear. By the work of her own hands, Elliot corrected him. Abigail's earned her place here. James turned to her. Is that how it is? You've replaced me already. It's not like that, Abigail said quickly, though she wasn't entirely sure what it was anymore. Elliot saved our lives. He's been kind enough to give us shelter and work. I'm sure he has, James muttered. Elliot stepped forward, his patience clearly thinning. Mr. Matthews, you're welcome to stay the night if you need rest, but I won't have you upsetting Abigail or the baby. I appreciate your concern, James said stiffly, but I can look after my own family. Can you? Elliot's voice was quiet but hard as steel. Where were you when they were freezing to death in a blizzard? James's face flushed with anger. You don't know anything about me or my circumstances. I know enough, Elliot replied. I know what matters to a man shows in his actions, not his words. For a moment, Abigail thought James might strike Elliot. Instead, he turned to her, his expression softening with effort. Abby, can we talk? Privately, she hesitated, looking at Emma, then at Elliot. I'll take Emma inside, Elliot offered. Give you two some time. Reluctantly, Abigail passed the baby to him. Emma went willingly, familiar with Elliot's arms. The sight made James's lips tighten, but he said nothing until Elliot had disappeared into the house. He's attached to her, James observed. To both of you, I'd wager. He's been good to us, Abigail said defensively. James sighed, running a hand through his dirty hair. I'm not here to fight, Abby. I just want a chance to make things right, to be the man you thought you married. Part of her wanted to believe him. The girl who had defied her parents to marry him still existed somewhere inside her, the one who had believed in adventure and true love and happy endings. But that girl hadn't watched her baby grow thin with hunger, hadn't faced death in a howling blizzard. I need time, James, she said finally. This is all so sudden. Relief crossed his face. Time, of course, I understand. I'll stay in town for a few days, give you space to think." He reached for her hand, squeezing it. "Just remember what we once meant to each other, what we could be again, with the means to do it right this time." After he rode away, Abigail stood in the yard for a long time, watching dust settle on the horizon. When she finally went inside, she found Elliot in the kitchen, feeding Emma mashed carrots. The domesticity of the scene made her throat tighten. "He's gone to town," she said. "He'll be back in a few days for my answer." Elliot nodded, wiping Emma's chin with a cloth. "And what will that answer be?" "I don't know," she admitted. "He's still my husband. A husband who abandoned you. He says he's changed, that he has means now to provide properly for us." Elliot's hand stilled. "Do you believe him?" "I want to," she whispered. "For Emma's sake. A child should have a father." She has Elliot stopped himself, looking away. "You're right. A child should have her father if he's a good man." The unfinished sentence hung between them. "She has me." Abigail had heard it as clearly as if he'd spoken it aloud. "Elliot," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. He stood abruptly. "I should check on the herd. The new calves need counting." Without looking at her, he strode from the house. That night, Abigail couldn't sleep. She lay awake remembering James as he had been when they first met, charming, ambitious, full of dreams that had seemed magical to a sheltered girl from a strict household. She remembered, too, how those dreams had gradually consumed him, pushing everything else aside, including her and eventually Emma. Could gold fulfill those dreams? Would wealth truly change James, or merely give him new horizons to chase? And then there was Elliot. Steady, reliable Elliot, who never made promises he couldn't keep. Who had created something real and lasting with his own hands. Who looked at Emma not as an obligation but as a treasure. Who looked at Abigail in a way that made her heart race, though he'd never spoken of it. Morning brought no clarity. Abigail went about her chores mechanically, her mind still churning. Elliot had left before dawn, taking several ranch hands to check on distant pastures. She was almost relieved at his absence. She couldn't bear to see the carefully neutral expression he'd worn since James's appearance. 3 days passed. Abigail moved through them like a sleepwalker, caring for Emma, cooking meals, tending the garden. Each sunset brought James's return closer, forcing a decision she still couldn't make. On the 4th day, as afternoon shadows lengthened across the yard, James rode up with a wagon trailing behind his horse. Abigail stepped onto the porch, Emma on her hip, watching as he pulled to a stop. "I thought I'd bring the wagon," he explained, jumping down. "For your things. And look," he reached into the wagon and pulled out a beautiful wooden rocking horse, intricately carved and painted. "For Emma." The gesture touched her, even as she noted that he still showed no inclination to actually hold his daughter. Emma, for her part, regarded the stranger with solemn eyes, clinging tighter to Abigail. "Have you decided?" James asked, his expression hopeful. Before she could answer, riders appeared on the ridge above the ranch house. Elliot and his men, returning earlier than expected. Abigail watched as they descended, tension coiling in her stomach. Elliot's eyes took in the wagon, the rocking horse, the expectant look on James's face. Something shuddered in his expression. "Mr. Matthews," he greeted James stiffly. "I see you've returned." "To collect my family," James confirmed. Abigail was just about to give me her answer. All eyes turned to her. Abigail felt the weight of Emma in her arms, the solid wood of the porch beneath her feet, the warmth of the home behind her. A home she had helped build, not with gold but with work and care and quiet moments. "I need to speak with Elliot first," she said, surprising herself as much as the men. James frowned but nodded. "I'll wait." Elliot dismounted, handing his reins to one of the hands. He followed Abigail into the house, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. Inside, Abigail set Emma down on her blanket with a wooden spoon to play with. The baby immediately began tapping it against the floor, oblivious to the tension between the adults. "You've made your decision," Elliot said, "not a question." "No," Abigail said. "I haven't, that's why I need to talk to you." He crossed his arms, waiting. "What am I to you, Elliot?" She asked directly. "To this ranch, am I just a housekeeper, a charity case?" "What?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "You know you're more than that." "Do I? You've never said. You offered me a job, a place to stay, but beyond that." She shook her head. "James is offering me a future. A secure one if what he says about the gold is true." "And if it's not," Elliot countered, "or if he finds another vein somewhere else, will he leave you again the moment something shinier catches his eye?" "People can change." "Some do," Elliot conceded. "Has he?" Abigail hesitated. "I don't know, but he's Emma's father. He has rights." "Rights he forfeited when he left you both to die," Elliot said harshly. "That's not fair. He didn't know the storm was coming. He knew it was winter in Dakota Territory. He knew you had a newborn." Elliot's voice rose, startling Emma, who began to whimper. Immediately he crouched beside her, his voice softening. "I'm sorry, little one. I didn't mean to scare you." Watching him comfort her daughter, Abigail felt something break inside her. "Why didn't you ever tell me how you felt?" She whispered. Elliot looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Because you weren't free to hear it. You're a married woman, Abigail. I respect that, even if your husband doesn't. And if I weren't married," he stood slowly. "If you weren't married, I'd have told you months ago that I'm falling in love with you. That I want you and Emma to stay not as employees or guests, but as family. That I want to be a father to her and a husband to you, if you'd have me." The words hung in the air between them. Abigail's heart hammered in her chest. "But you are married," Elliot continued quietly. "And I won't ask you to dishonor that. The decision is yours, Abigail. If you choose to go with him, I'll wish you well and mean it. If you choose to stay—" He swallowed hard. "If you stay, it has to be because you've truly ended things with James, not because you're running from him." Outside, they could hear James pacing on the porch. "I need to give him an answer," Abigail said. Elliot nodded, his face a mask once more. "I'll wait here with Emma." Taking a deep breath, Abigail stepped onto the porch. James turned immediately, hope written across his features. "Abby," he said, reaching for her hands. "Tell me you'll come home with me. We can start fresh, be a real family." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the man she'd married, but a stranger whose dreams had never included her, not truly. A man who spoke of family, but who hadn't once asked to hold his daughter. "I can't go with you, James," she said gently. His face fell. "Is it him? Kincaid?" "It's me," Abigail corrected. "I'm not the same woman who left Boston with you. I've changed. I need different things now: stability, honesty, a real partnership." "I can give you those things," James insisted. "The gold, it's not about the gold," Abigail interrupted. "It never was. It's about trust. I don't trust you anymore, James, not with my heart and certainly not with Emma's." Anger flashed across his face. "She's my daughter. You can't keep her from me." "I'm not trying to," Abigail said, keeping her voice steady. "You can be part of her life, visit her." "But her home is here now." "With him," James spat. "With me," Abigail corrected. "This is where we belong." James stared at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he stalked to the wagon, grabbed the rocking horse, and threw it to the ground. Wood splintered as it hit the hard, packed earth. "You'll regret this," he warned, mounting his horse. "When the gold runs out for him, and it always does, you'll wish you'd made a different choice." Abigail watched him ride away, the wagon bouncing emptily behind him. She felt neither triumph nor regret, only a profound relief that settled bone deep. When she returned inside, Elliot was standing by the window, Emma in his arms. He turned, his expression cautious. "He's gone," Abigail said simply. For good? I don't know, but I made my choice clear. Elliot studied her face. Why did you stay, Abigail? Truly, she crossed to him, close enough to see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. Because this is home. Because Emma deserves a father who puts her first. Because... She took a deep breath. Because I'm falling in love with you too, Elliot Kincaid. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He shifted Emma to one arm and reached for Abigail with the other, drawing her close. I'm not afraid of loving you, he whispered, echoing words he'd never spoken but had shown in 100 different ways. Either of you. As his lips met hers, Emma between them, Abigail knew she'd made the right choice. Not the easy one, perhaps, but the one that honored the woman she had become, strong enough to recognize real love when she found it, brave enough to claim it for herself and her daughter. Summer flowed into fall and fall into winter. James never returned, though occasionally letters arrived with money for Emma, assuaging his conscience, perhaps, or genuinely trying to provide in the only way he knew how. Abigail put the money aside for Emma's future, and answered with polite notes and sketches of their growing daughter. Elliot formally courted Abigail through those months, respecting her need to properly end one chapter before beginning another. When spring arrived again, he rode to the territorial capital and returned with divorce papers, a rare and difficult thing to obtain but possible given James's abandonment. The judge, hearing their story, had been sympathetic. They married in May, with wildflowers crowning Abigail's hair and Emma toddling down a makeshift aisle strewn with petals. The entire county came to celebrate, bringing gifts and food and good wishes for the couple who had become something of a local legend, the rancher who had rescued a mother and child from certain death, only to lose his heart to them both. As twilight settled over their wedding celebration, Elliot led Abigail away from the crowd to a hilltop overlooking the ranch. In the valley below, lanterns twinkled like earthbound stars. You remember the first time we stood here? He asked, his arm around her waist. Abigail nodded. It had been shortly after she'd decided to stay, when Emma was just beginning to crawl. Elliot had brought her to this spot to show her the boundaries of the ranch, the creek to the east, the mountains to the west, the forests to the north, and the rolling prairie to the south. You told me your dream, she recalled, to build something that would last, something you could pass on to future generations. Elliot smiled, pulling her closer. I never told you the rest of that dream. I always hoped those future generations would be my own children. I just never thought I'd find the right woman to share it with. He kissed her temple. Until you stumbled into my life, half frozen but fighting like hell to keep your baby alive. We've come a long way since then, Abigail murmured, leaning into him. We have, he agreed. And we have a longer way yet to go, together. As they stood watching darkness claim the land, Abigail felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. The path that had led her here had been difficult, even dangerous at times, but she wouldn't change a step of it. Every hardship had strengthened her, preparing her for this moment, this man, this life, this love. Elliot turned her in his arms, his expression suddenly serious. I promised myself I'd tell you something today properly. Something I've felt for a long time but wanted to say when you were truly mine. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Abigail Kincaid. You and Emma are my heart, my home, my everything, and I'm not afraid of loving you, not now, not ever. As he held her and Emma close in the gathering darkness, Abigail knew that some promises were meant to be kept, and this one, this love, would endure through whatever storms life might still bring their way. 5 years passed, transforming the Kincaid Ranch into one of the most prosperous in the territory. Elliot's careful management and Abigail's sharp business sense proved a formidable combination. They added acreage, improved their breeding stock, and built a larger home to accommodate their growing family. Emma, now 6, had been joined by 3-year-old twins, Andrew and Alice, who brought equal measures of joy and chaos to the household. Emma had taken to big sisterhood with natural authority, herding her siblings with the same determined efficiency she showed when helping Elliot with the gentler ranch chores. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Abigail sat on the wide porch of their home, mending one of Andrew's perpetually torn shirts. The valley spread before her in a patchwork of gold and crimson, the aspens turning early that year. From the barn came the sound of Elliot's voice, deep and patient as he taught Emma how to brush down her pony properly. A rider appeared on the horizon, making his way slowly up the long drive to the house. Shading her eyes, Abigail recognized the lean figure of Thomas Wells, the banker from town. Not a social call, then. Thomas rarely left his office except for business. Setting aside her sewing, Abigail called toward the barn. "Elliot, Mr. Wells is coming." By the time the banker reached the house, Elliot had emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth, Emma trailing behind him like a shadow. "Thomas," Elliot greeted him, extending a hand. "This is unexpected." The banker dismounted stiffly. He was a thin man with spectacles that constantly slipped down his nose, but his eyes were kind behind the glass. "Elliot, Mrs. Kincaid, I'm afraid I bring news that couldn't wait for your next trip to town." Something in his tone made Abigail tense. "What is it?" Thomas glanced at Emma. "Perhaps the little one might check on her siblings." Elliot nodded. "Emma, go see if Martha needs help with the twins." Emma frowned, sensing the adult's tension, but obeyed, running into the house with a backward glance. "What's happened?" Elliot asked once she had gone. Thomas removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. "It's about James Matthews. I received word yesterday from a bank in California. He was killed in a mining accident 3 weeks ago." The news hit Abigail like a physical blow. Despite everything, despite the years of separation and the pain he had caused, James had once been the center of her world, the father of her firstborn child. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "That's terrible news." "There's more," Thomas continued. "He named Emma as his sole heir." The mine was productive, apparently, quite productive. "There's a substantial sum being held in trust for her." Elliot's hand found Abigail's, squeezing gently. "How substantial?" Thomas named a figure that made Abigail gasp. It was more money than she had ever imagined, possessing enough to buy several ranches the size of theirs, enough to send Emma to the finest schools back east, enough to change their lives completely. "There are conditions," the banker added. "The executors of the estate wish to meet Emma. To verify her identity, they say, though I suspect they simply want to know the child who will inherit everything." "In California?" Abigail asked, her mind racing. Thomas nodded. "In San Francisco, they're prepared to pay all expenses for the journey." Elliot's face had gone carefully blank, the expression he wore when confronted with problems he couldn't immediately solve. "When would this need to happen?" "Soon. Before winter makes travel difficult." Thomas hesitated. "There's one other thing, a letter." He reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. "From Matthews, to be delivered to Mrs. Kincaid in the event of his death." Abigail took the envelope with trembling fingers. Her name was written across the front in a hand she still recognized, despite the years. "I'll leave you to discuss the matter," Thomas said, sensing their need for privacy. "I'm staying in town tonight if you have questions." After the banker had gone, Abigail and Elliot sat side by side on the porch steps, the letter between them like a living thing. "Are you going to read it?" Elliot asked finally. Abigail nodded, breaking the seal. The paper inside was covered with James's distinctive scrawl, hastier than she remembered, as if written in a hurry. "Abby," she read aloud, "if you're reading this, I've finally found the one vein I couldn't tame. I hope it was quick at least. I've been thinking about you and Emma more lately, about the choices I made. The man I wanted to be versus the man I became. You were right to stay with Kincaid. He could give you what I never could: stability, honesty, a home that doesn't shift with every new rumor of gold. I've made provision for Emma. It's blood money, in a way payment for the father she never had. Use it to give her every advantage. Send her to school. Let her see the world. But keep her grounded in the values you and Kincaid stand for. I've seen what wealth without character does to people. I don't want that for my daughter. I've told myself I stayed away these years to spare you complications, but the truth is I was ashamed. Every time I thought of coming to see Emma, I remembered how I left you both. Some sins can't be undone, only atoned for. This is my attempt at atonement. Tell Emma about me someday if you think it right. Tell her I loved her in my way, even if I didn't know how to show it. And Abby, I hope you found happiness. You deserve it more than anyone I've ever known. James." Tears slid down Abigail's cheeks by the time she finished reading. Not for the man James had been to her, but for the father Emma would never know, for the regret that had clearly haunted him, for the attempt at redemption that came too late. Elliot's arm slipped around her shoulders, solid and warm. "He tried in the end," he said quietly. "Yes," Abigail agreed, wiping her eyes, "in the only way he knew how." "What will you tell Emma?" Abigail folded the letter carefully. "The truth, when she's old enough to understand it, that her father made mistakes but loved her, that he wanted to give her opportunities he never had." Elliot nodded. "And the trip to San Francisco, the inheritance, we should go," Abigail decided. "Emma deserves to know this part of her history, and the money." She looked up at the home they had built together. "The money changes nothing about who we are or what matters to us." "No," Elliot agreed, his eyes warming as he gazed at her. "It doesn't." That evening, after the children were asleep, Abigail and Elliot sat before the fire, planning the journey to California. It would be the farthest either of them had traveled in years, a grand adventure that both excited and intimidated them. "We could see the ocean," Abigail mused. "Emma would love that. And proper city restaurants," Elliot added with a smile, "though none as good as your cooking." Abigail laughed, leaning against his shoulder. "Flatterer." His expression grew serious. "I mean it, Abigail, all of it. The money, the journey, none of it changes what we've built here, what we mean to each other." "I know that," she assured him, touching his face. "I made my choice years ago, Elliot. I chose the man who held me and my baby close in a blizzard and wasn't afraid to love us both. Money can't change that. Nothing can." He kissed her then, deep and certain, a man secure in his place in the world and in her heart. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I never told you," he murmured. "What I thought that day I found you in the snow. You were so still, I feared I was too late. Then I saw you clutching Emma to your chest, using your last strength to keep her warm." His voice thickened with emotion. "I knew then that you were the strongest person I'd ever meet, that if you lived, I'd never let you face another storm alone." Abigail's heart swelled with love for this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "You kept that promise," she whispered. "Every day." As the fire crackled and night deepened around their home, Abigail thought of the journey ahead, not just to California, but through all the years to come. There would be challenges, joys, perhaps even sorrows. But they would face them together. A family forged not by gold or blood alone, but by choice and love and the courage to build something lasting in a wild and unpredictable world. In the quiet of their home, with children sleeping peacefully upstairs and a future bright with possibility. Abigail knew this was the real treasure, not the inheritance waiting in San Francisco, but the life they had created together. A life richer than any gold vein, more precious than any fortune. A life built on 3 simple words, spoken in 100 different ways. I'm not afraid of loving you. The journey to San Francisco took nearly 3 weeks, a grand adventure that transformed Emma from a ranch child into a seasoned traveler. She marveled at the train, pressing her nose against the window as mountains and plains, and finally, the breathtaking coastline passed before her eyes. The twins stayed behind with Martha and Robert, who had returned to help manage the ranch during the family's absence. San Francisco itself was a revelation, a bustling metropolis of elegant buildings and clanging cable cars, ships from around the world crowding its harbor, people of every nationality thronging its streets. Abigail, who had once dreamed of seeing such places before settling into marriage with James, found herself both overwhelmed and exhilarated by the city's energy. The lawyers who managed James's estate received them cordially in a wood-paneled office overlooking the bay. Emma, wearing her best dress and on her most proper behavior, answered their questions with a composure that made Abigail's heart swell with pride. "She has her father's eyes," one of the lawyers observed, studying Emma's face. "But her mother's spirit, I think." "She has herself," Elliot corrected gently. "Her own person entirely." The lawyer smiled, appreciating the response. "Indeed, Mr. Kincaid, and a fine young lady she is becoming." The business was concluded efficiently. Trust documents were signed, arrangements made for the transfer of funds, questions answered about how the mine would continue to operate. Through it all, Elliot remained a steady presence, his hand occasionally squeezing Abigail's in reassurance. It was only when they stepped out onto the street, the legal matters settled, that Emma asked the question Abigail had been dreading. "Mama, can we see where my real father is buried?" Abigail exchanged a glance with Elliot before crouching to Emma's level. "Elliot is your real father, Emma. In all the ways that truly matter." "I know," Emma said with the simple certainty of childhood. "But the man in the picture you keep in your drawer, the one who sent me presents sometimes, he helped make me, didn't he? Before Papa found us in the snow." Tears pricked Abigail's eyes at her daughter's understanding. "Yes, sweetheart. His name was James Matthews, and yes, we can visit his grave if you'd like." They found it the next day, a simple marker in a cemetery overlooking the ocean. James Matthews, it read. 1842-1880. Seeker of fortune. "That's all?" Emma asked, frowning at the sparse inscription. "What would you add?" Elliot asked gently. Emma considered the question seriously. "Father of Emma," she decided, even if he wasn't very good at it. Abigail stifled a sad laugh. "That's very generous of you, sweetheart." "Was he a bad man?" Emma asked, looking up at her mother with those direct eyes that never failed to see through pretense. "No," Abigail said truthfully. "He wasn't bad, just restless. Always looking for something better over the next horizon. He didn't know how to be content with what he had." "Like me with my pony," Emma nodded sagely. "I kept wanting a bigger one until Papa explained that Daisy was exactly the right size for me now, and I needed to appreciate her before I could have something bigger." Elliot smiled, ruffling her hair. "Something like that, yes." Emma placed a small bouquet of wildflowers they had brought on the grave. "I hope you found what you were looking for," she said to the stone. Then, taking both Abigail and Elliot's hands, she added, "Can we go see the sea lions now? The hotel man said they're very funny." As they left the cemetery, Abigail felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a burden she hadn't fully realized she was carrying. Emma had acknowledged her biological father and found her own way to make peace with his absence. It was more than Abigail had dared hope for. That night, in their hotel room after Emma had fallen asleep, exhausted from a day of sightseeing, Abigail and Elliot stood by the window watching fog roll in from the bay. "You raised an extraordinary child," Elliot said, his arms encircling her from behind. "We raised an extraordinary child," Abigail corrected him. "You've been her father in every way that counts since the day you found us." He kissed her temple. "I've been thinking about the trust money." "Oh, we should use some of it to expand the ranch," he suggested. "Not for us, but for the children's future. Emma and the twins will need their own legacies someday." Abigail turned in his arms. "And what about now? Isn't there something you've always wanted but couldn't justify?" Elliot considered the question. "I've thought about breeding horses," he admitted. "Not just for ranch work, but quality stock for racing, for the cavalry. It would take investment connections." "Then that's what we'll do," Abigail decided. "A portion for the future, a portion for dreams, and maybe—" she hesitated, "maybe a school for the valley. There are enough children now to warrant one, and more coming every year as the territory grows." Elliot's face lit with approval. A fitting legacy for James, in a way. Education was something he valued, from what you've told me. "Yes," Abigail agreed. He was self-taught but proud of his knowledge. He would have wanted that for Emma, for all children. They returned to the ranch as autumn painted the land in russet and gold, bringing with them trunks of books for the planned school, architectural drawings for new stables, and a newfound appreciation for the life they had built together. The twins, now talking in the mysterious shared language of multiples, greeted them with wild enthusiasm, while the ranch hands welcomed Elliot back with evident relief. "Never thought I'd miss the sound of bawling calves," Elliot confessed as they settled back into ranch life. "Or the smell of sage after rain. City life has its attractions," Abigail agreed, unpacking their trunks, "but this is home." As winter settled over the valley, bringing with it quiet evenings by the fire and the anticipation of Christmas, Abigail found herself reflecting on the journey their lives had taken. From that desperate day in the blizzard to this moment of contentment and prosperity, the path had been neither straight nor easy. Yet every turn had ultimately led them here, to this life rich with love and purpose. On Christmas morning, with snow dusting the world outside in pristine white, the children tore into their presents with typical enthusiasm. Emma received the book she had coveted, the twins' wooden animals carved by Elliot's own hand. But it was Abigail's gift that brought tears to her eyes, a delicate gold locket containing a tiny portrait of all three children, painted by an artist they had commissioned in San Francisco. "Open the other side," Elliot urged as she admired it. Inside was an inscription, "For storms weathered and joys shared. All my love, it's perfect," she whispered, kissing him as the children, distracted by their new treasures, paid no attention. "I have one more gift," Elliot said, his eyes twinkling. "For all of us, come outside." Bundling up against the cold, they followed him to the barn. Inside, in the warmest stall, stood a magnificent chestnut mare, her coat gleaming in the lantern light. "This is Duchess," Elliot announced proudly. "The beginning of our breeding program, and look, she's brought a surprise." At the mare's feet, barely visible in the straw, lay a tiny foal, spindly-legged and perfect, with a white star on its forehead. "She wasn't supposed to foal until spring," Elliot explained. "But it seems Christmas had other ideas." "Oh, Papa, he's beautiful," Emma breathed, reaching out a tentative hand to the newborn. "What's his name?" Elliot looked at Abigail. "I thought your mother might want to name him." Abigail studied the foal, who was already struggling to stand on wobbly legs, determined despite his early arrival. Courage, she decided. His name is Courage. Perfect, Elliot agreed, his arm slipping around her waist. Courage it is. As they stood together watching the new life before them, Abigail thought of another Christmas long ago, when she had been alone with an infant uncertain of their future. How different things were now, surrounded by family, secure in love, rich not just in material things but in all the ways that truly mattered. "What are you thinking?" Elliot asked, noting her reflective expression. Abigail smiled up at him, her heart full. "I'm thinking that some journeys begin in storms but end in sunshine. And I'm grateful, so grateful, that ours brought us here." Later that night, with children sleeping and the house quiet except for the crackling of the fire, Abigail and Elliot sat close together on the sofa, sharing a rare moment of peaceful solitude. "Do you ever wonder," Abigail asked, "what would have happened if you hadn't found us that day in the blizzard?" Elliot's arms tightened around her. "I try not to," he admitted. "The thought of losing you before I even knew you, it doesn't bear considering." "I believe we would have found each other somehow," Abigail said. "Some things are meant to be." Elliot smiled, touching her cheek. Like a rancher who never planned to marry, finding a half-frozen woman and her baby in a snowstorm and losing his heart completely. "Exactly like that," Abigail agreed, leaning into his touch. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in silence. But inside their home, built with love and strengthened by shared dreams, warmth and light prevailed, a beacon in the wilderness, a testament to the power of courage and the heart's capacity to find its true home, even in the most unlikely circumstances. And as Elliot Kincaid held his wife close in the firelight, he remembered the words he had spoken years ago, words that had shaped their life together, words that remained as true now as they had been that first day. "I'm not afraid of loving you."